Johann is a journalist and best-selling author. He's well known for his books on mental health, addiction and attention. He joins us in the South by Southwest Sydney studio now. Welcome, Johann.
Hey Marty, I'm so happy to be here. At the height of COVID, when the whole world was shut down, I kept having this recurring dream about coming back to Sydney. And there was that moment, like in the middle of the whole pandemic when you thought, will the world ever come back? So I was like, I never come back here now without feeling like the dream happened, the plague ended. So I'm well chuffed.
Sydney was quite a ideal place to be, at least in the early half. Things were kind of normal, which was lovely.
Well, I was in Las Vegas for a lot of it, and that was not the ideal place to be. There was the funniest bit was when they reopened, they had these very strict mask mandates, so you had to wear masks inside, rightly. But so when they reopened the strip clubs, there were strip clubs where the only thing the strippers were wearing was a face mask, because by law they had to. And I thought, this is the perfect symbol.
Contrast, isn't it?
Vegas during a plague. This is what you need.
Well, you're in Sydney for South by Southwest Sydney. Your presentation, you spoke about your book, Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention. What were some of the key points you delivered in your address? What were you trying to impart?
Well, we're living in a huge crisis of focus and attention. So the average office worker now focuses on only one task for less than a minute. And for every one child who was identified with serious attention problems when I was 7 years old, there's now 100 children who've got that problem. And the reason this matters is I would just say to anyone watching, think about anything you've ever achieved in your life that you're proud of. Whether it's starting a business, being a good parent, learning to play the guitar, whatever it is, that thing that you're proud of required a huge amount of sustained focus and attention. And when your ability to focus and pay attention breaks down, your ability to achieve your goals deteriorates, your ability to solve your problems deteriorates, you feel worse about yourself because you actually are less competent when you can't pay attention. So attention is our superpower as a species, right? It's at the heart of all achievement. And we need to get our attention back. So I could feel this happening to me. I could feel my own attention was getting worse. So I went on a big journey all over the world, from Moscow to Miami to Melbourne, not just to cities that began with the letter M. I don't know why I did that. And I interviewed over 200 of the leading experts on attention and focus. And what I learned is there's scientific evidence for 12 factors that can make your attention better or can make it worse. And they range quite widely. There's some obvious ones. There's some aspects of our tech, but actually they range very widely, from the food we eat to the sleep we don't get, from the way our kids' schools work to the way our offices are designed. It's a broad array of factors. But the key thing to understand is your attention did not collapse. Your attention has been stolen from you by some really big and powerful forces. But once you understand what those forces are, we can begin to get our brains back for our kids, for us, both individually and collectively.
So as you travelled around the world meeting all those experts, what was the kind of consensus, or what was something they told you that you drew together into a thread into this book that you wanted to convey through it?
One of the things that's interesting is there's such a diverse array of things that are screwing with our attention at the moment that it's really important for us to understand. I'll give you an example of one that I think will be playing out for everyone watching to some degree today. So I went to MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, to interview one of the leading neuroscientists in the world, an amazing man named Professor Earl Miller. And he said to me, look, there's one thing you need to understand about the human brain more than anything else. You can only consciously think about one or two things at a time. That's it. This is a fundamental limitation of the human brain. The human brain has not changed significantly in 40,000 years. It's not going to change on any time scale we're going to see. But what's happened is we've fallen for a kind of mass delusion. The average teenager now believes they can follow 7 forms of media at the same time. Oh. The rest of us are not that far behind them. So what happens is scientists like Professor Miller, scientists all over the world, including here in Australia, get people into labs and they get them to think they're doing more than one thing at a time, and they monitor them. And what they discover is always the same. You're not doing more than one thing at a time. What you're doing is you're juggling very quickly between tasks. You're like, what did you just ask me, Marty? What is this message on WhatsApp? What does it say on the TV over there just happened? What is this message on Facebook? Wait, what did you just ask me again? So we're constantly juggling. And it turns out that juggling comes with a really big cost. The fancy term for it is the switch cost effect. It's a term everyone should know. When you switch between tasks, it comes with a cost. You remember much less
productivity loss, or
catastrophic productivity loss. You remember less of what you do. You make far more mistakes. You're much less creative. I remember when I first learned that from Professor Miller and other scientists looking at their research, I was like, okay, I get it. But that's a small effect, right? It's not a big deal. When you look at the evidence, it's shockingly big. I'll give you an example. So a scientist was hired by Hewlett Packard, the printer company, to study their workers. It's a small study, but it's backed by wider evidence. And he split the workers into 2 groups. And the first group was told, just get on with whatever you've got to do, get on with your task, and you're not going to be interrupted. Do what you've got to do. Second group was told, get on with your task, whatever it is, but at the same time, you've got to answer a heavy load of email and phone calls. So pretty much how most of us live. And the scientist monitored them, and at the end of it, he tested their IQ. The group that had not been interrupted scored on average 10 IQ points higher than the group that had. To give you a sense how big that is, if you and me sat down together now, Marty, and we smoked a fat spliff, our IQs would go down in the short term by 5 points. So being chronically interrupted in the way we are is twice as bad for your intelligence as getting stoned right now. You'd be better off sitting at your desk, doing one thing at a time and smoking a spliff than you would sitting at your desk, being constantly interrupted and not getting stoned. Don't want to give you the wrong idea. You're better off neither getting stoned nor being interrupted, obviously.
Or do that at work.
But you begin to see why Professor Miller said to me, we are living in a perfect storm of cognitive degradation as a result of being constantly interrupted. But this is not inevitable, right? We can deal with these things. And I went to places from France to New Zealand that have begun to deal with them.
So, quick question. At South by Southwest Sydney, as you were delivering this, how do you know everyone was paying attention to you?
They definitely weren't.
So who's actually stealing our attention? Social media, our boss, our mums texting us when we're trying to work? Who's primarily responsible for this?
Well, don't blame your mum. She's low on the list, right?
Great.
She gave you life, so, you know. My mum, whenever I have any achievement, my mother always attributes it to the fact that she breastfed me till I was 2. So whenever one of my books starts, well, she goes, "My tits fucking did that." But she's Scottish. But not just doing a weird voice. Our attention is being stolen by a big array of forces. But you mentioned social media. I spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley interviewing people who designed key aspects of the world in which we now live. And the thing that most struck me was how sick with guilt they feel about what they've done.
Really?
Give you an example. There's a guy called James Williams, a great person, worked at the heart of Google. One day he was speaking to a tech conference where the audience were literally the people who designed the stuff you're going to use today. And he said to them, if there's anyone here who wants to live in the world that we're creating, please put up your hand. And nobody put up their hand. And he's like, look, I'm out of here. And he quit and he became this really important philosopher of attention. So the people in Silicon Valley kept explaining to me the key way in which these technologies are undermining our attention and what we can do about it. And even though it's very simple, it took me quite a long time to get my head around it. So if you opened now on your iPad in front of you, please don't. But if you opened TikTok,
focusing.
Exactly. But if you open TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which I refuse to call X, if you open that and begin to scroll, those companies begin to make money out of you in 2 ways. First way is really obvious. You see advertising, right? You know how that works. Second way is much more important. Everything you ever do on these apps, including in your so-called private messages, is being tracked and scanned by their artificial intelligence algorithms to figure out who you are and what makes you tick. What makes you happy, what makes you sad, what makes you horny, what makes you angry. And it's figuring that out for lots of reasons. But the key one is it's figuring out what to show you next to keep you scrolling. Because every time you open the app and begin to scroll, they make money because you see ads. The longer you scroll, the more money they make because you see more ads. So all this genius in Silicon Valley, all this AI, all these algorithms is geared towards one thing and one thing only when it comes to social media. Figuring out how do we get Marty to open his phone as often as possible, open the app as often as possible, and scroll as long as possible. That's it, right? Just like the head of KFC may be a perfectly nice woman, but all she cares about in a professional capacity is how often did you go to KFC this week and how big was the bucket you bought. And if you become obese, that's not her problem, right? In the same way, this is a machine, as my friend Tristan Harris, who also worked at the heart of the machine for a long time, puts it, a machine designed to hack and drill your attention. And it is really, really good at it.
One thing I want to ask as well, someone who I was speaking to after your presentation said that it wasn't just the distraction that they felt, but from your presentation, you also talked about the impact this has on loneliness and creating a sense of loneliness. How does our stolen attention create this loneliness epidemic we're currently seeing, and how do we pull ourselves out of that?
Everyone knows they have natural physical needs, right? Obviously, you need food, you need water, you need shelter. If I took those things away from you, you'd be in real trouble, right? Very quickly. But there's equally strong evidence that all human beings have natural psychological needs. You need to feel you belong. You need to feel your life has meaning and purpose. You need to feel people see you and value you. And screen-based interactions, plenty of good things about screen-based interaction, but they don't meet those deeper needs. I'll never forget, I went to the first ever internet rehab centre in the world. It's outside Spokane in Washington State. I spoke to people there, and they get all kinds of people there, but they disproportionately get young men who've become obsessed with online role-playing games like Fortnite, World of Warcraft, and the same young men are usually obsessed with porn, online porn. And I never forget, afterwards I went out with Dr. Hilary Cash, she's the therapist who set up this centre, and she said to me, you've got to ask yourself, what are these young men getting out of these games? They're getting something, right? That's why they're doing it. And they're getting the things that they used to get from the society, but they no longer get. They get a sense
connection and socialising.
Well, they're getting a sense that they get a sense they're physically moving around. Like the figures for how little people leave their houses is kind of staggering, even before the pandemic. They get a sense they're good at something. We have a school system that makes young men feel they're not good at anything. They get a sense that they're gaining skills, which we don't really have a culture that does that. But what they're getting is a kind of parody of those things. I don't think it's coincidence they're also obsessed with porn, right? I'm not particularly anti-porn, but if your entire sex life consisted of looking at porn, you'd be kind of pissed off all the time because that's not what we evolved for, right? It's close enough to what we evolved for that you can become obsessed with it, but it's not close enough to what we need for you to feel satisfied and fulfilled, right? No one spends an hour looking at porn and feels as good as they did after you've had sex with someone, if the sex went right, which is a big if. But so I do think what this does is it gives us something that is close enough to the things we evolved for that we can become fixated on it, but it's not close enough to meet our deeper needs. So it leaves us feeling, in ways we don't understand, slightly askew, slightly off. So think about, if screen-based interaction met our deeper needs psychologically, we would have all been fine in the pandemic. We all had iPads, right? I never once in the entire pandemic heard anyone ever say the sentence, hooray, another Zoom call. Never, right? Because it didn't meet our deeper needs.
That's such a great point. So, okay, so I now understand why my attention is stolen. I understand how it makes me feel. What do you tell people to do about it? How do they practically address those issues? What did you tell people in your presentation at South by Southwest Sydney is the solution to this?
So for all of the 12 factors that are harming our attention that I write about in my book, Stolen Focus, there are two levels at which we need to deal with them. I think of it as defense and offense. There are loads of things we can all do immediately to protect our attention. I'll give you an example of two very quickly. Everyone should go online and Google K-Safe. It's just the letter K, safe. I should totally have bought stocks in this company before my book came out because they're making more money because of me. It's very simple. It's a plastic safe. You take off the lid, you put in your phone, you put on the lid, you turn the dial, and it locks your phone away for anything between 5 minutes and a whole day. I use it for 3 hours a day to do my writing. I will have my friends round for dinner, unless we all put our phones in the K-Safe. And at first it's really difficult, but I would say to people, the pleasure of actually us paying attention to you and you paying attention to us is so much greater than the pleasure of whatever shitty update on Instagram you're going to get, right? So that's one thing. I'd recommend everyone buy a K-Safe. I'd also recommend everyone download an app called Freedom. Let's say you're, addicted to eBay or Instagram, whatever it might be. You download the app, it syncs with your laptop, your phone, and your desktop if you want it to. And you can just say to it, don't let me go on eBay or whatever for the next 3 hours. It could be anything, 5 minutes, whole day. And once you push the button, if you then go to that website, it just says you have been set free, and there's a picture of a little bird flapping, and you can't do it anymore, right? So this is about, there's all sorts of things like that, and I go through dozens in the book that we can do. But I want to be really honest with people, because I do not feel most people who are communicating about attention are leveling with people. I am passionately in favour of these individual changes. They will massively improve your life. They will not totally solve this problem. Because the truth is, this crisis did not happen because you had bad habits, or I had bad habits, or our kids had bad habits. This happened because of really big and invasive forces. The way I feel like at the moment is it's like someone is pouring itching powder over us all day, and then at the end of the day leaning forward and going, Marty, you should learn to meditate. Then you wouldn't be scratching all the time. And you want to go, fuck you. I'll learn to meditate. That's really good. But you need to stop pouring this itching powder on me, right? So we need to go on offense against the forces that are doing this.
So how do we do that? I understand you can do things at an individual level, but if not everyone's getting a safe, using those apps to block particular other apps on their distracting apps on their phones and devices. How do you change the overarching culture, the itching powder? How do you get rid of that?
I'll give you an example of something that was done here in Australia when I was a kid that has massively improved your life and the life of everyone in this room. When I was a kid, the only form of petrol that you could buy in this country, in most of the world, was leaded petrol. And it was discovered that exposure to lead is really bad for people's brains and particularly bad for children's ability to focus and pay attention. And if it's in the petrol, it was in fumes, everyone was breathing in a load of lead. So what happened was a group of ordinary mums, what were called housewives at the time, banded together and said, why are we allowing this? Why are we allowing the lead industry to screw up our kids' brains, right? And it's really important to notice what they didn't say. They didn't say, so let's ban cars, let's all go back to horse and cart, just like none of us is saying, let's get rid of technology, right? That's not the answer. What they said is, let's get rid of leaded petrol and move to a different kind of petrol that doesn't screw up our kids' brains. And these mums, we forget this now, they fought like hell for their children. The lead industry fought back. They funded a whole pseudoscience. It was a big fight, and it followed the classic pattern of all successful political fights that was described by Mahatma Gandhi. First they ignored them, then they laughed at them, then they fought them, then they won. There's no more leaded petrol anywhere in Australia, Britain. In fact, Venezuela just became the last country in the world to ban it. As a result, the average Australian is 5 IQ points higher than they would have been had we not banned leaded petrol. Now, to me, that's a really important model, a really important, inspiring example that we can follow alongside all the individual changes, which is let's identify the factors in the environment that are screwing our attention, and let's get them out of the environment and replace them with things that do the same job better, right? So we can regulate social media. I spoke to people in Silicon Valley. They explained to me how we can do it. There are very practical ways we can do it. There are all sorts of things we can change. The food we're eating is really negatively affecting our attention, but we can change the food we eat. We can challenge the food industry. The way our kids' schools work is really harming our attention. If you wanted to destroy children's attention, you would build a school system around getting them to memorize meaningless facts for tests that measure nothing of any value, right? That is what we've done in Australia and Britain. It's crazy. So there's all sorts of practical things that we can do. But the key thing is it requires a shift in psychology. You know, when I could feel my attention was getting worse, I was so angry with myself. When I saw the young people I love who couldn't focus, I was angry with them. I was thinking, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with our environment. But together we can fix that. But it requires us to realize, you know, we are not medieval peasants begging at the table of King Musk and King Zuckerberg for them to throw us a few little crumbs of attention from their table, right? We are the free citizens of democracies, and we own our own minds. And together we can take them back if we want to.
So is that what you get out of coming to things like South by Southwest Sydney? This opportunity to spread that message, to get that idea into the influential and interesting people who come to these regulators, startup founders. Is that what you're trying to do, is spread that message?
I'm trying to spread the message, but I don't think spreading it to them is actually any more important than spreading it to anyone else, right? The truth is, all meaningful changes happen because ordinary people band together and demand it, right? I mean, again, I think about examples in my own life. Like, I'm gay, right? I've seen the most staggering transformations in my lifetime on that. And I think a lot about a friend of mine, Andrew Sullivan, who's an amazing writer. Lots of people watching will know his work. So in 1994, Andrew was diagnosed as HIV positive at the height of the AIDS crisis, when people thought that was just a death sentence because they didn't know that the treatments were about to come online. And Andrew was like, okay, I'm going to die. I've got a few months left to live, probably. His best friend Patrick had just died. He quit his job and he went to a little place called Provincetown to do one last thing. He decided to write a book about a crazy utopian idea that no one had ever written a book about before. And he's like, okay, I'm never going to live to see this. No one alive today will live to see it. But maybe somewhere down the line, someone's going to find my book and pick up this idea. The idea he wrote the first ever book about was gay marriage. And when I think, God, you know, we're up against these really powerful forces, right, on this subject. I try to imagine going back in time to Provincetown to 1994 and saying to Andrew, okay, you're not going to believe me, but 26 years from now, A, you'll be alive. That would have blown his mind. B, you'll be married to a really hot man. That'll be legal. C, I will be with you when the Supreme Court of the United States, quotes from this book that you're writing, when it makes it mandatory for every state in the United States to introduce gay marriage rights. And the next day, you'll be invited to a White House that's been lit up in the colours of the rainbow flag to have dinner with the president to celebrate what you and so many other people have achieved. Oh, and by the way, that president, he's going to be black, right? That would have sounded like the most crazy science fiction. But it happened not because people appealed to like opinion leaders and all of that. It happened because huge numbers of really brave gay people in the generation before me came out, and huge numbers of straight people opened their hearts to them, changed their minds. All change happens because ordinary people band together and demand it. All the best changes, all the best political changes. So to me, you know, yes, we're up against very powerful forces, but, you know, homophobia prevailed for 2,000 years, right? You want to talk about powerful forces, and, you know, gay people, we're like 5% of the population. This subject, attention, this is affecting 100% of the population. This isn't just fighting for a minority, this is fighting for all of us, right? And so I absolutely believe this struggle to get our attention back is essential for us, for our children, for our future of our democracy, because you can't have a democracy if we're interacting through sites that are designed to maximize anger and rage. I can explain how that works if you want. But so absolutely we can come together and do this. We are all beneficiaries of big political fights that happened before, and we have to do this.
How do you think South by Southwest Sydney and these types of events can shape the trajectory of people's careers?
Something's gone really wrong with our idea of productivity. You know, we think that the productive worker is the worker who works themselves to the point of exhaustion, doesn't sleep, responds to your emails immediately. Actually, those are all things that make you really unproductive, that ruin your attention and your ability to think deeply. So, for example, I think speaking at this event, kind of communicating to people, something's gone really wrong with our idea of productivity. There's all sorts of ideas you can gain from coming to an event by Southwest Sydney that, you know, we're in a culture that's got so many bad ideas in it that I think coming to a place that can fertilise you with good ideas can really help you to choose a different path.
And are there any speakers or sessions you've been particularly inspired by here or other South by events you've been to?
I've been so fucked with jet lag that I've been like incapable of listening to anyone, so no.
Your attention has been stolen.
Exactly, it's been literally raided by time zone differences. Damn it.
Johann, thank you so much for coming to Australia and to South by Southwest Sydney and sharing all these huge ideas.
Hooray, thanks for having me, Marty. I loved it.
You can watch more of these videos at youtube.com/South by Southwest Sydney.